Post-Terran Contact, late 2667. J. Kurt. Jay was discharged from a medical facility on Alta, the main planet of the system named after it, and left through the main doors where he took a minute to pause and take in his surroundings. The hospital was situated on a hill, and a series of cars rotated out of the roundabout, departing with similarly discharged patients. He had minor fractures on his ribs and a minor concussion, but ultimately, he was screened by medical personnel from the Stellar Fleet. He was given a set of paperwork gathered from the planet's Republic Bureau of Citizens and pulled his records. He was going to need them for the local recruitment offices. Since losing Cam and his ship, Jay had felt nothing but regret since his time back on land. For the people he let down, and his failure to warn the authorities caused many to lose their lives. He was still unsure of the conclusion on Draxus, but was assured by the captain of the ship that transported him here. He sluggishly resolved himself and took the main rail to a location where the armed forces held their recruiting office in his part of the city. The city he resided in was named Altamir. It was a city most noted for its buildings not being any higher than the hill the hospital sit upon. It overlooked a majority of the city that set itself within a valley of hills, with trees littering the area surrounding the buildings at the base of the hills. As such, a mix of buildings and trees flooded the valleys. The rail he took would cut through the main heart of Altamir, and his ride ended shortly past the first main stop in the heart of the city. He departed the car, and a gentle breeze moved through the air, rustling the leaves and grass. The noise of civilians was louder than he expected, and stepping off the rail, he made his way down from the station and onto the main walkway. Much of the city was designed with pedestrians in mind, and as such, the city placed a heavy emphasis on communal travel. This followed well across the planet, and only those who lived out by the farms, and even more, the rural areas, found more common use for them. As a result, the pedestrian walkways made their way into the alleyways of buildings, and since the pathways were well maintained, kept a standard of beauty for those who walked them. Throughout the city, larger open areas were prime real estate for the use of expensive and artistic works, such as in the plaza before the rail station was the depiction of a pair of birds intertwined. The color of the birds contrasted with the white granite it was chiseled in, and some would occasionally take photos of it from above the stairs that led into the station. Jay continued past the plaza and followed a road north, beside one of the only roads in the area. Shops lined the sides of the walkway, and the further he traveled, the smaller the buildings became. Even though it was late morning and the sun was rising to its zenith, the trees provided ample coverage for shade to the point where some areas were darker than others due simply to tree density. As he walked, he would occasionally peer into the alleyways and noticed small decorations for food shops, steam actively emitting from the entrance with the light of the shop, illuminating the steam with a soft yellow glow. There were many instances of this and believed there to be a plethora of nightlife he was unaware of. He did take the time to detour one of these shops and noticed they were embedded into the small crevices of buildings with a row of seats before the chefs and a small walkway behind them. He knew it to be a tight squeeze that he could attempt, but carried on his path. Jay made it to a gated entry with the gate itself open, and a road leading into the compound, a sidewalk paved beside it. The road led to a small lot where few cars were parked on his left, and to his right was a paved zone big enough for, at most, a large-sized dropship. The zone was currently empty, and Jay continued on the walkway that led itself between the car lot and the landing pad, toward a one-story building that extended halfway between the lot and the pad. The area before the building was filled with dirt, and the prints of shoes littered the width of the dirt trail. The closer he advanced, the sounds of yelling could be heard from behind the building, along with the sounds of young responses. The building itself had a series of large windows running across the central part of it, and within it were promotional advertisements related to each branch. Each one surrounded a door that led to their respective recruiter. From the left was the Orbital Guard, Stellar Fleet, with additions of the Marines and Air Force, and finally the Raiders. Since the time of commercial and easy access to space travel, the military decided to merge some of the branches under a singular entity. Therefore, the Marines and Air Force were merged under the Stellar Fleet. The Orbital Guard used to be the Army, and they now have two branches of desired placements. If you were placed on an orbital station as its crew and security, then you were part of the rightly named Orbital Guard. But for a more dedicated offensive force on the ground, you would take the job of the Guard Troopers. It was a specification like any job, and one in the Orbital Guard could switch between two. The Orbital Raiders, we the only new branch that stood on its own, but shared relations with the other two. They had no medical and no dedicated transport, so they relied heavily on the Navy to take them where they need to go. Their routes were based on the early iterations of the Orbital Guard, back when they operated an airborne unit in the early 20th and 21st centuries. At least that's what he read in the pamphlets the fleet docs gave him. He stood before the doors, deciding what he wished to apply to. He had briefly told Commander Auclair of his intention to join the Raiders, but he wavered. In his time in the hospital, he constantly looked over each branch and who would best confront the enemy. His best bet would be the fleet. In this day and age, most fights are waged in the stars, and being aboard one of the combat ships would let him see the most action if he were to be a weapons operator. However, he felt an obligation deep within him to make it personal. "Who better yet than the Raiders?" he said to himself when he was called out to by an individual in a gray short-sleeve button-up shirt and black tie, tucked into black slacks with a silver stripe running down the sides of the leg, with a clean black belt with a silver buckle and shiny black dress shoes. "Can I help you, sir?" A man approached, stopping arm's length away, meeting Jay's gaze. "Looking to sign up?" Yes, Staff Sergeant Cooper, but you can call me James," he said, directing Jay indoors to the Raider office. "So what can I do for you?" "I'm, looking to join and I was told the Raiders is the way to go," Jay said. "Who referred you? I can offer some sort of a bonus if they're actively serving, more so if they're in the Raiders." Jay paused a moment before answering. It was Commander Auclair, from the Maiden of Blue. Cooper's eyes widened. "How did you come across him?" "He saved me, in the outer edge of the system. My ship blew up and he saved me." "That sure is something," he said, typing away on his computer. "How soon are you looking to join?" "Now, if possible," Jay replied. "Of course," Cooper said. "Is there any particular specialty you're looking for? We have the Raider Sniper program, demolitions, heavy weapons specialist. Anything that catches your eye?" "I'll just do the standard infantry," Jay said. He looked at Jay but settled on Jay's decision. Cooper typed away, asking for additional information regarding his credentials. Jay gave him all that he needed, and the paperwork was completed, only short of signing it. "Before you sign this, you think you'd be up for a test?" "Like what?" Jay asked nervously. "Just a physical strength test. Don't want you failing out in boot camp because you can't run. What do you say?" Jay nodded, nervous about the rapid development. He was hydrated and loose, but nervous still, since he didn't like being scored on a workout. The test was a 3-part series of a max set of crunches, pull-ups, and a 3-mile run. Without further delay, Jay was given an extra set of workout clothes, and when he was dressed, followed Cooper into the back of the building where several teenagers were lined up in a formation facing 2 instructors. Sergeant Corey and Corporal Fields. "A moment?" The two halted what orders and information they were giving the teens and met Cooper and Jay. "Yes, Staff Sergeant," replied Fields. "Take this young man on the initial strength test and see how he does." The two looked over at Jay. He was older than all of the teens here from what he observed, and anxiousness was getting the better of him. "Thinks you'll be able to run?" "It's okay if you can't," said the sergeant. Jay nodded, and he was told to fall in line at the back. He, like the others, was donned in a set of black shorts that stopped middle of the thigh and a gray shirt that was tucked in. "All right, first up, crunches." The test began, and the group first did a series of crunches with alternating partners after they finished their own set within a 2-minute window. Jay passed with an average mark of 100, and the next began with pull-ups. He was above average in build and scored a total of 17. Then the final test began. The run was decent for the first half, and Jay passed with an average time of 24 minutes flat. When all was said and done, and his assessment finalized, Cooper pushed the documents ahead. By now it was late into the afternoon, and the office was swarming with the soon-to-be recruits. When the paperwork was being pushed through, Jay was approached by 2 of the males of the group. Out of the 20, there were at most 3 females. "Hey!" a short blonde-hair teen greeted. "Name's Moran, and this is Cameron. What about you?" "Jay." He stood to meet their greetings. "What job did you pick?" Cameron asked, almost meeting his height but averted his eyes ever so slightly from Jay. I think infantry. I didn't think there are other jobs in the Raiders that fit me," he said, resigning himself to his decision. So did we, Moran exclaimed. We ship out a day after tomorrow, once we go to the processing station. When do you go there? Jay asked. Tomorrow, the kid said jubilantly. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking of it. The two left when Cooper returned, his information displayed on a holopad. They hashed out the details shortly when he returned from the test. Displayed, it detailed that he was going to serve for a minimum of 5 years and 3 years inactive under the specialty of Raider Infantryman. Now all I need from you is to sign here, and I should be able to fit you in for tomorrow's processing. He laid out a folder. I made some calls and it looks like they can take you, as long as you got this. It was sealed with a wax insignia for the Raiders, a flaming skull with a crossing sword and rifle in the background. Normally you'd have to go to processing first to confirm a date, but sometimes they can expedite it, he said with a wink. Jay nodded and signed the form digitally, sealing his newfound commitment. You got a ride? To which Jay replied no. Come here at 06 tomorrow and we can get you processed. Sound good? To which Jay nodded. Yes, sir. That's the spirit, Cooper replied and patted him on his back. You know, I had a younger brother who joined and got out about a year ago. Last I heard from him, he was in Draxus and joined the militia band there. Guess you never really do get out of it, he said with a solemn expression. Well, I'm sure he's fine. Don't be late tomorrow. Jay agreed and left the office. The once bustling room of aspiring raiders was cleared, but met them outside, where they mingled with one another as they left the compound at intervals at a time. Jay bid them farewell and found refuge in a nearby inn, where he took the time to reflect on his upcoming new life journey. So far it was nothing but a mess, and he was doing data running jobs in the outer colonies that ended in disaster from an entity that wanted them dead and also summarily cost the lives of innocent folk and his best friend. He rested on a chair that faced the window. Now with the sun below the horizon, he opened it to reveal a cool summer breeze that was comforting to him. By remembering Cam, it prompted him to grab a device that was given to him by the Navy, but he didn't have time to look at it, or simply forgot. It was a thumb drive with what Eau Claire said was a message to him. They kept the data drive, but took the time to transfer a personal message from the drive. He read it. It detailed his sudden aggression during the realization of Jay's mistake that he shouldn't have made. To Jay and any who finds this, I'm sorry how I reacted to you stopping for food. You were stressed, and I know how you are after a mission coming close to danger. Remember that encounter we had with the pirates from Lamba? You gorged practically the whole burrito supply from the station in the next system over. But I write this just in case we don't make it. At least someone could read how it wasn't your fault, but I have to let you know, anyone to know. The reason I acted as I did is that we might have been able to prevent another system from facing the same fate as Dima. But there's another reason, and I'll end it here. My fiancé was on Dima when it was attacked. We were going to stop by and I was going to tell you, but then we were attacked. I had no time to tell you. If you can, Jay, or whoever you are, please find Alexandria Farron. See image. Jay sat quietly as he read. He wanted to cry, yell, scream, and tear at everything in his vicinity. But he knew he couldn't do that. He knew it wouldn't help, and instead turned his head to the outside. The lights now illuminated beneath the trees, giving it a somber but spirited atmosphere. As he stared blankly outside, just taking in the breeze and ambiance, he heard a call from below. Jay, you busy? It was Cameron, and this time Moran wasn't with him. Sure, you hungry? To which Cameron nodded. Let's eat, it's on me. Cameron nodded and proceeded to wait for Jay, who only tossed on a new shirt and pants and quickly tied his shoes before he met Cameron, waiting near the entrance to the inn. Cameron stood to just below Jay's nose, and his brown hair was a mess. He was dressed in casual clothes that complemented each other of charcoal-colored pants and a dark denim button-up shirt rolled just past his forearms. Hey! I thought you'd be with Moran, Jay inquired, striking small conversation. He's celebrating with his family before we process, and I'm not one for parties, he said, his voice reaching a soft tone at its height. Jay judged that he must mostly be soft-spoken. Jay took Cameron to a restaurant just beside his inn, and both ordered a meal from the noodle and soup menu. Say, how old are you? You do seem a little older than the rest of the pool, Cameron asked, and he leaned, with his chin resting on the top of his wrist. I'm 22, and space does that to you, Jay replied with a grin as their food finally arrived. Wait, you were a pilot? "What are you doing here at the Recruiters?" he inquired. "My ship blew up and the Navy found me floating," he replied, leaving out details of the alien ship and comm. "Been in the hospital until today. What about you?" "Me? I just turned 20, Cameron replied, slurping a portion of his noodles. The two continued conversing well into the late afternoon, exchanging their interests and how they grew up. Jay mentioned he started flying at 16 to run data for a local broker and found he had a knack for it. It wasn't later that he met Cam, who would be his technician for the last few years. "What happened to Cam?" Cameron asked quietly. "We went our separate ways just before I lost my ship," Jay said, regret singeing at his heart. "But that is in the past now." Cameron nodded at the shallow attempt of optimism, and the two shortly ended their meal, leaving for their homes. "See you tomorrow, Jay." "You too, Cameron," he said with a slip of the tongue, his mistake going unnoticed. Jay returned to his room and read over the message once more, deepening the regret that only grew, and the fate of Cam's fiancée plagued his mind. Tomorrow would start the journey he would need to set his life anew.
Report. ODR Recruit Depot, Sol System Mars. New recruit cycle, hotel company. Total recruits for cycle 1014. Estimated pass rate 57%. Designated senior training instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Slaughter. Estimated arrival date 2667-1012.